Welcome to another live stream. For today's live stream, I'm going to be talking about John Haynes and the John Haynes series and all the things that led to me creating the John Haynes series. So that's what I'm going to be talking about for today's live stream. And the John Haynes character was one I created way back in 1990 when I first started writing again. Now, I had been writing back when I was 9 years old, but I stopped around 13, 14, not 13, 14, yeah, 13 years old. I stopped until I was about 16. And the John Haynes character was one that I created based on myself and my own experiences. And I tried to write a John Haynes story for over a decade, and I didn't really get anywhere for over a decade. I had four failed attempts at it, and it wasn't until my mother made a statement regarding how the devil didn't like me that I got inspired to start writing another John Haynes story. And this John Haynes story, as I wrote it, was going to be a middle finger up at Satan for not liking me. So that's where I primarily got the idea for the novel, The Temptation of John Haynes, which I started writing way back in 2005. I'm going to take a minute to let everybody know the live stream is going on. And that's what I'm going to do now. Okay. Gonna take a minute to let everybody know the live stream is going on. And that's what I was doing in 2005 when I started to wrote an outline for The Temptation of John Haynes. And hold on 1 second. And that's what in 2005, that's when I started writing The Temptation of John Haynes. And that book took me close to a year to finish and complete the first draft. Now, I thought The Temptation of John Haynes was a solid story. However, a lot of publishers and literary agents did not. So as I was submitting this book along with the Cassandra Cookbook at the time from about 2006 to about 2008, the book got over 500 rejections. And that's when I decided to start putting it on the schedule to get published. Now, the John Haynes series, it started with The Temptation of John Haynes, and John Haynes is the foundation for everything in the SJS Direct universe. So with The Temptation of John Haynes, it's the entry point for everything that is as related to the SJS Direct universe. So this is a book you really definitely want to pick up because it's the book that starts everything. And it's the book that will give you a foundation for everything. It's similar to Iron Man in 2008. And that Iron Man laid the foundation for everything as related to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Well, The Temptation of John Haynes is the book that lays the foundation for everything as related to the entire SJS Direct universe. So everything related to the SJS Direct universe starts with the novel The Temptation of John Haynes. So this book lays the foundation for not only John Haynes's book, but it also lays the foundation for the ISIS series and the E-Steam series. And it creates the entire continuity for all of the books that are related. Now, Temptation of John Haynes is a 400-page book, but it's a fast-paced read. It's very fast-paced, and it features the story of how the John Haynes character is tempted by Lucifer, and how he's recruited this East team to seduce John Haynes, and he wants to compromise his soul by having East team seduce him in the story. And the story, as I wrote it, was supposed to be a commentary on how the devil tries to destroy, how not only the devil tries to destroy one person's life, but how it's a two-way street. And on that two-way street, hold on one second. Eva's asking me, when we buy your books on Amazon, do you receive a notification? Yes, I definitely do receive a notification for every book that people buy. I check my KDP royalty reports, and those royalty reports tell me whether a book has sold. So I know almost immediately when a book is sold. So and I'm going to get back to the temptation of John Haynes. But the story was about how Lucifer he recruits the East team character to seduce John Haynes, and in that plan, he wants to compromise John Haynes so he can take his soul. Now, in the story, I'm making a commentary about the roads between heaven and hell, and I'm making a commentary that says that it's not a one-way street, but it's a two-way street. Just like the devil is out here trying to destroy people's souls, God is also trying to save people's souls. So with that road, we're believing that, Lucifer is trying to destroy John Haynes, but we also see how East team is being shown an example of Christ through John Haynes's actions and behavior. And we also get to see with the John Haynes story a commentary about Black men in the workplace, Black men in the business world. And that was another thing that I made a point in the story to make sure it was all about, was showing you that it was possible for a Black man to be a leader in the community. He could be a CEO if given an opportunity, and he could go out here and do great things in the community if given that opportunity, that having that power. And that was something I wanted to show with the John Haynes character, that we could see a Black man showing how he would use the power of a position like a CEO, because when it comes down to many racists, they don't like the idea of us seeing a Black man with the power of a CEO, because they fear, like in the Black Panther movie, what we're going to do is use that power to hurt white people. But with the John Haynes character, I wanted to show that you were going to see a Black man going out here to empower other Black people. So when in the story, we see the John Haynes character putting aside his issues with a former enemy, Scott Grayson, towards empowering the Black community, because he understands that there are things bigger and more important in the Black community than his feelings. And that example shows East team that a Black man's life has value, and it makes her think about the value of her own life. So The Temptation of John Haynes is a very deep story. It's a very rich story, and it's a very powerful story. And everybody who reads it, they wind up really enjoying it, and they wind up seeing a very powerful story about Black manhood, Black masculinity, and an example of a Black man who is having a relationship with Christ, and how that relationship with Christ can not only change the lives of people around him, but can literally take someone who was a demon like East team and make them see a complete example of Christ that makes them want to change their life. So with The Temptation of John Haynes, it's a book that, again, opens the door for a lot of things in the SJS Direct universe, and it is the foundation for everything in the SJS Direct universe. It's a book that is essential reading for anyone who wants to go out here and, learn about everything as related to the SJS Direct universe. It's a book that is one that you definitely have to pick up. So I'm going to leave a link to it in the chat. you can pick up that book there. Oh, Edek is here. Hi, what's up? And For Life Deep, what's up? Oh, he's like Easy Rollins. Well, this I'm happy to hear that because I've read Easy Rollins mysteries, and they are very compelling. I like what Walter Mosley did with them, and with John Haynes, I wanted to make a story about a regular working class brother and what a working class brother again would do if you gave him power. Because one of the things that inspired the story, in addition to my mother telling me the devil didn't like me, was one of those motivational posters that was talking about character. And they said if you really wanted to see what a person's character was like, you give him power. And I felt that if you really wanted to see what the character of a person who follows Christ was like, was to give them this power of a CEO, which was just like having the power of a god. And in today's world, a CEO is just like being a god. So I wanted to show that if you gave a black man that type of power, what he would really do with it. Because when it comes down to a lot of racists, they believe if you give a black man power, he'll just go out and destroy white people. But again, I always believed that if you gave a black man power and he had character and he was a God-centered man, he would go out here and he would empower other black people. Edek, yeah, I did check out the Power records, and they remind me a lot of the old Marvel superhero show in the way that they were presented. And when I was listening to them, I was getting inspired because they reminded me of what I would want to do if I did audiobooks. I would want to do audiobooks very similar to what they did with the Power records and the superheroes. And that's kind of what I would want to see an ISIS series audiobook look like, or an E-Steam series audiobook like, or a John Haynes series audiobook looks like. So, reading Bombard Dobbit and what he was saying. I'm glad to have made the Liam Neeson video. Well, I don't know about O'Shea, but yeah, we shouldn't be saying bad words against women. I mean, just because that allows racists. He is right. That does allow racists to come in and have a gateway to attack us. So I have to agree with him on that. That, yeah, we shouldn't say those bad words. We can critique black women, but we don't have to go calling them B's and H's. So we don't really need to do that. But when I was talking about? I was talking about the John Haynes character. I was talking about the temptation of John Haynes. And it's a very, and I was talking about, yeah, everything related to the character, everything related to the original story. And it was a lot of work putting this one book together. I mean, this book, again, I worked from about 2005 to 2006 on the first draft, and I worked for about 4 or 5 years just on the revisions alone. And that was even after I got the 500 rejections from publishers and literary agents. And after I went out and published it myself, this book has gotten numerous critical acclaim. Lots of readers have loved this book, and they love the John Haynes character, and they love the positive image that the John Haynes character represents of black manhood and black masculinity. And I wanted to get out here and do a sequel to John Haynes, which was The Man Who Rules the World, but I was stuck for a long time. And it wasn't until my mother went into the hospital that I got the inspiration to actually go out here and start work on the John Haynes sequel, The Man Who Rules the World. Now, The Man Who Rules the World is the sequel to Temptation of John Haynes, and it features John Haynes taking on God Cassius, being from the East-Team's former homeland, Cassia, which was the nation before Egypt. And the nation before Cassia, this god Cassius, he was the original ruler of the world, which was just like America. And this guy wants to come back and take over the world. And John Haynes has to bring together both men and gods to take on this menace of God Cassius in Man Who Rules the World. And this was a story that, as my mother was in the hospital, I literally wrote in a week. And I had spent like 3-4 years trying to figure out how to write this story, and I couldn't get the story to go past the first chapter. I was sitting there, it's like, I'm trying to get the story to go. I'm trying to get the story to work, and I couldn't get the story to work until my mother wound up in the hospital, and I wound up sitting at home. And then I was finally able to get The Man Who Rules the World written about, I think, about 2013, 2014, because I had a lot of projects, 2013, 2014. And this was a book that it just came to me in a week, and I was able to put that story together. And it was a core story to the SJS Direct universe. I actually believe it's the first of real event of the SJS Direct universe, because there's a difference between a milestone story and an event story. Well, this was a story that featured everybody, but it was a John Haynes centered story. And it was a story that literally brought all the characters of the SJS Direct universe in it. So you're going to see almost every character in this story in The Man Who Rules the World. And it's a story that shows, the power of a man who follows Christ and what he can do to overcome the greatest adversity out here. This is like, it's almost like Avengers or one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies in scope and scale. And it's like a big budget movie come to life in the pages of a book. So Man Who Rules the World is one of those books, like right after The Temptation of John Haynes, you can just pick it up and you can just get right into it. And after Man Who Rules the World, I decided to just do some stories that featured, John Haynes with the ISIS series. I did some stories. I called it the John Haynes arc, because it's the stories where ISIS finally meets John Haynes, and then he's a part of her world and part of the SJS Direct universe. And the first story in that John Haynes arc is ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. A lot of people, they don't know it's the start of the John Haynes arc because they just come in on the book, but it's actually the start of the John Haynes arc, which is what I call the second story arc for the ISIS series. It's and in this story, which is a milestone story where ISIS takes on the Cyber Goddess, she meets John Haynes for the first time, and their relationship starts out a very rocky one. But in this action-packed story, we get to see the character of ISIS having an interaction with John Haynes, learning about his company, the company he works at, Morris Phillips, and learning that she has to go and seek out help from someone like John Haynes. Now, after I did Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, I followed it up with Night of the Vampires. Now, Night of the Vampires is a story where Isis starts to learn more about John Haynes' company, Morris Phillips. She starts to learn more about the culture of John Haynes' company. And she starts to learn that there's more to his company than just human beings. Because one of the things that is core to John Haynes' company is it's a company where all the people, there aren't people working there are demons working there and creatures of the night working there. So his company is actually a corporate hell, and he's the CEO over a corporate hell. And I got inspiration from that from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I also got it from Ivan Reitman's Ghostbusters, because there were comedy elements that I liked from Ghostbusters and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I wanted to put into the fantasy, and I wanted to put into the story. So Night of the Vampires was the story where Isis started to learn how to work with John Haynes, and they started having a little bit of friction in that story as they worked together. And eventually their relationship we start to see the foundations of their relationship. That relationship, is tested in the follow-up book, Bride of Dracula. Now, this is a story that a lot of readers came in on for the entry point for the ISIS series, but it's the third book in the John Haynes story arc, and and to my surprise, it's the most popular one. It's the one where Isis and John Haynes take on Dracula, and it's a story where we start to see Isis. She cares about John, but then she gets caught up in her feelings, and that's what leads to her becoming this Bride of Dracula. And then we start to see John Haynes really emerge as a hero in this story. And in that story, he says one of these lines that I liked, where he says he's the scariest MF in the room because he's an educated black man. And I made that line because I always thought to myself, you know, they talked about Jason, they talked about Freddy, they talk about Michael Myers and all these horror characters. But what really scares a white supremacist is an educated black man. He's the scariest MF in the room, and he's the scariest MF in the room for the following reason. Because when it comes down to the educated black man, he is someone that isn't afraid of white supremacy. He isn't afraid of white supremacy's monsters, and he can overcome white supremacy's stereotypes, and he can define himself as his own man. So that's what makes a black man who is educated the scariest MF in the room, because your Draculas, your Frankenstein, none of those monsters can scare an educated black man, because this man has so much power over himself that he terrifies all of these white monsters and white social constructs that are supposed to be horrific, because he understands his value and worth as a black man. So in Bride of Dracula, that is the first time that your John Haynes says that very powerful line. And I had that line, I just came up with it a long time ago, and I wanted to use that line, so I used it in Bride of Dracula. And I believe that's one of the reasons why the book is so popular, because as of right now, this is one of the most best-selling ISIS series books so far. And it's the book that everybody just seems to want to buy and wants to come in. Now, Bill Walko's art on this cover, it's spectacular. And I think that's another reason why people come in. But after they read the story, they love this story so much that they want to come in and start buying ISIS books from the back, or they start buying them from the front. Now, I followed up on the third story in the vampire arc with Escape from Transylvania. And in Escape from Transylvania, we see the Isis and John friendship grow, and we start to see them learn how to really work together. In this one, I show you how a black man and a black woman work together to overcome adversity, and how they learn how to stand and support each other in adversity. Now, with both Isis, John Haynes, and Eaststein, I show you one thing that I believe that's to be very important, and that is showing you a black man standing at the side of a black woman. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted the image to be on the cover, because I wanted to show you a black man and a black woman being together, because in a lot of books these days, we don't get to see a black man and a black woman coming together, and we don't get to see them working together. So that's one of the things that's great about the John Haynes stories and the John Haynes series that people like, is seeing the whole idea of a black man standing right at the side of a black woman, working together with a black woman, and them loving and caring about each other. And we see that in the stories like Temptation of John Haynes, or John's appearances in the ISIS series. And I felt that was one of the things that we needed to see in a story, was seeing a black man love a black woman, a black man care about a black woman, and seeing a black man standing up for a black woman. Because towards the final scenes in The Temptation of John Haynes, where Eaststein reveals her true self, that's when John shows her God's love. And that's the thing that really leads to her changing. And that's something that also I wanted to make a commentary on with the Eaststein character in The Temptation of John Haynes, was how our black women have been demonized. Because when it comes down to our sisters, a lot of them, they believe a lot of things that lead to them hating themselves and hurting. And that comes a lot of times, I believe, from the daddy issues. And I touch on that in The Temptation of John Haynes, where Eaststein starts looking at her past with her adopted father, Osiris, and the rejection of her father and the anger she has with her father. And it's those issues with her father that are messing her up really bad. But then she realizes how much she loves John Haynes, and she realizes that if she wants to have that closer relationship with him, she has to finally confront the demon that she has become. And when she confronts the demon she has become, that's when she starts to embrace her humanity, and then start moving forward towards forming that closer connection with the John Haynes character. And so it's done in a very powerful scene later on in the book. And it's in that later scene that we see the Esteem character transform. And I wanted, again, to add that in the story, because when it comes down to Black women, a lot of them have been hurt, and that's turned them into monsters. But it is the man who has to show them that love that will allow them to break past that wall and stop being a monster and start being a human being again, and start connecting with human beings again. Because when it comes down to Black women, a lot of them, they put up this face and they put on that mask like the Esteem character did, and that mask prevents them from connecting with people. But as this character is shown God's love, that's what makes her decide to make those changes, and those changes lead to her starting to form that relationship with Christ. So that's what makes The Temptation of John Haynes a very, very powerful story. And again, it's a story that I urge everyone to read, because again, it is the foundation for the SJS Direct Universe, and it's the story that is the foundation for everything that is John Haynes. It's the core to his story, and it's the core to all of the other stories like those in the ISIS series and The Man Who Rules the World. Now, when it comes down to the John Haynes character, for a lot of years, I was okay with him just appearing in ISIS series books and Esteem series books, because he's a very hard character to write. But over the years, as I've seen all of these negative images of Black men out here, these images of Black men in dresses, these images of Black men being made to be coons, and these images of Black men which are just not masculine and positive, that's when I decided to go back and start writing new stories. I was actually encouraged by Mike Williams, the artist who did the cover for John Haynes' A Conversation with Death, to go out here and start doing more stories for John Haynes, because he was looking at the media and I was looking at the media, and we were like, there aren't that many positive images of Black men out here, and there aren't that many masculine images of Black men out here that are positive, and there aren't that many positive and balanced images of Black men out here. And as I was talking to Mike, and he was encouraging me to go out here and do John Haynes, another John Haynes series, that's when I decided, to go out here. He didn't start out as a character in other books. He had his first book was The Temptation of John Haynes, but he made appearances in other books because he's a hard character to write. So I made him a supporting character in ISIS series books and Esteem series books first, and then as the characters started to get a following, I decided to go out here and create the John Haynes series. And again, I was encouraged by Mike Williams to go out here and do the John Haynes series. And he was the guy who encouraged me to go out here and do it. He was the guy who encouraged me to do the John Haynes series. And I decided, I'll start out with a simple story that follows up after The Man Who Rules the World and Escape from Transylvania. And that was A Conversation with Death. Now, A Conversation with Death was a book that I put together in about a week. It's about 22 pages. And it was something that I was going to do similar to Esteem, No Good Deed, in that it was going to be an introduction to the character for new readers. It was going to be an entry point, and it was going to be the first book in the John Haynes series. And I went out here and I started, put it together really fast. And then Mike decided he would do a cover for it. And this was the cover that Mike did for me. He did it as a favor for me. And this cover has been so popular, it's not funny. And after I did A Conversation with Death, it was a huge hit last year. I mean, it was a very huge hit. I mean, this book was like, for a print-on-demand book, it did very well. I mean, it's gotten, I think, about 30, 40 sales, 30, 40, 50 sales in digital and paperback. And it's one of those books that every time I promote it, people like it. It's been sold in the US. It's also been sold in the UK, Germany, all over the world. And I'm eager to get out here and do the follow-up book, John Haynes' Dark Succubus, on seeing the popularity of the John Haynes, A Conversation with Death. And a lot of people have told me it reminds me of DC's Constantine. They told me that John Haynes' story reminds them of Constantine, because in this story, he has a conversation with the entity known as Death, and they're talking about the direction of his life. Now, this story starts the character transformation arc for the John Haynes character in the John Haynes series. And this is the story that just lays the foundation for that, while building on everything that was established in Temptation of John Haynes, Man Who Rules the World, and the ISIS series appearances. Yeah, it is interesting, O'Meal. The Dark Succubus is going to be a story where we have John Haynes, who is being tempted by the succubus, and it's where it's like he's in this. Well, he's in a dream world, and he has to choose between going into that world or our world. And it's a very dark story, and it has a lot of dark themes. And that's another thing that I like about writing the John Haynes character, is that I can go and explore those dark themes, because I'm a darkly inclined guy. And I put those dark themes all throughout John Haynes' stories, whether they be Temptation of John Haynes, Man Who Rules the World, or his appearances in ISIS series books. I put a lot of dark themes in there because he is a darkly inclined character, just like I'm a darkly inclined person. And I also put undertones in there, and I put things in there related to the goth subculture. And in this one, The Conversation with Death, he literally has a fight in a coffee house with goth people in there. So O'Meal's asking me, John Haynes is a dynamic character with a lot of growth and character progression. He's come a long way from where he was in 2011. He's come a long way as a CEO. He's grown as a leader. He's grown as a man. And that's why a lot of people like the John Haynes character, because he's a very strong masculine character, and he has very strong masculine traits. And he shows that Black men can be leaders when they are in leadership positions. And he shows that he can take charge in situations. So a lot of people like that about the character. They like the strength of character that he has. They like the courage that he has when he's faced in adversity. And they like the challenges that he faces. Looking at Benny G, he says he learned a lot about beta males in the Man Crisis. And yeah, I learned a lot. I did a lot of research on the Man Crisis, which is another book that I wrote just last year. And in the Man Crisis, I talk about all the behaviors of beta males and how those behaviors prevent them from growing. So with that, I mean, everything that I learned about men and masculinity, that's what I applied to the John Haynes character, because I want to give a lot of Black readers and readers all over the world, I want to give them a positive example of Black manhood, a positive example of Black masculinity, and I want to give them that balanced and humanized image of Black masculinity and Black manhood, because we don't get those images all the time. I mean, the closest we get was Netflix's Luke Cage, and then we saw what they did with Netflix's Luke Cage. When Netflix's Luke Cage started showing that he was going to be a leader like he was in the second season, that's when Netflix pulled the plug and decided to end that series. And that's what made me realize why it's important for there to be more John Haynes stories, because we need to have that type of image out there for young Black boys to see as an example of manhood and masculinity, and to show them that a Black man could be a hero to his community and make efforts to protect his community. Because one of the things that the John Haynes character does as the CEO of Morris Phillips is he makes efforts to help out Black-owned businesses. And that's something else I talk about is you have to have if you're going to have a Black hero, he has to be in the community and he has to be from the community. One of the issues I have with Black Panther is that you have this guy coming from Africa and he doesn't know the community and he doesn't know what the community needs. Whereas John Haynes, he's been living in the community. He knows what the community needs and he's there to listen to the people in the community. So when he goes out here and he does things in the business world, they actually have an impact on people because he knows what type of resources need to be allocated. And how he does this is through giving contracts to Black-owned businesses. And that's what people want, people really need, because it's the Black man as a CEO who gives those contracts out that allows those Black people to find employment and find empowerment through employment. So with that character, I wanted to show the power of a Black man in that type of position and how he can use his power to empower others, because it's economic power that leads to political power, and it's economic power that allows the community to grow and to build. So that was one of the things I put in the John Haynes books, is that we start to see things as related to things like group economics and Black empowerment, because when it comes down to a lot of books that feature Black heroes, we don't see anything as related to promoting things as related to Black empowerment. But with John Haynes, I wanted to show how a Black CEO couldn't go out and empower others. For Life, Deep One asks, is Black Panther a beta male? In the movie, he was a beta male, but in the comics, he's a lot stronger than that. But in the movie, he was just a complete beta. And yeah, Devon asked me, do I think Terry Crews is a beta male? No, I think Terry Crews is a basket case, because when I look at Terry Crews, he's a buck dancing, bojangling minstrel, and your Terry Crews is an embarrassment to Black manhood and Black masculinity with the way he sits there and buck dances and bojangles for white people. I mean, he is a butter biscuit Negro. Good morning, David Bowman. But your butter biscuit Negro, and watching him behave is just sad and pathetic, because when I look at your Terry Crews, he's an embarrassment overall. And I didn't know that hardcore age about Black Panther. I thought he was pretty strong after what was it? I forget his name. Christopher Priest run, but that's par for the course with any Black character owned by a corporation like Marvel Comics. Now, when it comes down to these Black characters that are owned by corporations, they don't want them to appear to be stronger than the white characters. And we saw that with the way Static Shock was when it was on the air. When Static Shock was on the air from 2000 to 2004, and it was becoming the most popular character and the most popular TV series on television, that's when we started to see Warner Brothers start to try to downplay the Static character. That's why I believe we didn't get any Static Shock toys. And that's why I believe, we didn't get any Static DVDs, because Static was starting to become very popular. And as he started to rise in popularity, and the corporate had a problem with him. So that's why they bury characters like Black Panther and Static, because when it comes down to these corporations like Disney, Warner Brothers, and their subsidiaries like Marvel and DC Comics, usually what happens is They are promoting white supremacy with these superheroes, and they don't like the idea of us seeing positive images of black men. Hi, Smiley Man. Working on a live stream right now, and we're talking about John Haynes and the John Haynes series. And they don't want you to see positive images of black men. They don't want you to see images of black men ready to take charge in their community, black men ready to take a leadership role in their community, and black men ready to empower others with the power that they have. Because when it comes down to black men who understand their role as men, these are men who are ready to take a leadership role. They're ready to provide in their community. They're ready to protect their community, and they're ready to defend their community. When it comes down to those black men, those are the ones they have issues with, especially heterosexual black men, because those black men will go out here and they will go out and have children, and they will teach their values to their children. That's why they don't like to see images of a black man at the side of a black woman. And that's why they don't want to see the idea of a black man being a leader in his community. That's why the whole idea of a black character starting to become popular, they have an issue with, unless it's an emasculated beta male like a Black Panther, or somebody like a Storm who was out here with all of these white men and is a white man's fantasy. But they don't like the idea of you seeing a black man, focused on black empowerment and focused on black validation and black approval. Because when it comes down to a lot of the characters created by white creators, oftentimes they are just there to get white validation and white approval. But when a black creator creates a character like myself, then you're going to start to see a character who is out here, and he's focused on black empowerment, black leadership, and he's focused on just seeking approval, not from white people, but from God and his own community. So that's one of the things that I felt was important about the black character, John Haynes. And that's why I feel it's important to go out here and have a character that we own ourselves, rather as opposed to a character like a Falcon or a Black Panther or a War Machine or a Storm or a Black Lightning. They're just employees who work for white people. Whereas a character created by a black man, you're going to see a black man presented in a leadership role, and you're going to see him presented in a strong way instead of presented in that weak way we often see a lot of black characters presented in media. Another thing we like with your hardcore, you just talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates and how he made the women of Wakanda stronger and smarter. And that's another thing that comes from mainstream white supremacist media and those who believe in white supremacy, is that they have a gynocentric view of black people. And that gynocentric view has them believing that the black woman is more powerful than the black man. So your Ta-Nehisi Coates, he comes from a very gynocentric view, and that's why I don't like a lot of his work, is because he's sitting there elevating women when we need to have black men see an image of black manhood that is strong. So when I look at Ta-Nehisi Coates as Black Panther, he's very gynocentric, whereas when I go out here and I do John Haynes, I give you a strong masculine image of manhood and black manhood, and I also give you an image of a black man in the natural role that God created black men to be. So when I go out here and do John Haynes stories, you start to see the image of a black man, and you start to see an image of a black man that is strong and masculine. And then you see with Eastine, who is at his side, or Isis when she's at his side, you start to see the woman in the supportive helpmeet role. So when you read a John Haynes story, you get to see those natural, balanced, and humanized roles, those natural God-given roles of men and women, something you don't see in most mainstream media that has black people in it, because most mainstream media that features black people in it, usually all you get is this gynocentric view of black men. And that gynocentric view has you thinking that either the black men have to submit to the black woman, or the black man is something wrong with him if he doesn't submit to the black woman. So they're always pushing that beta male thinking in their stories. And it's that beta male thinking in their stories that, winds up turning people, off from many of these books that they, and in movies that they produce. Because I remember I was sitting in the theater watching Black Panther, and it was just a major turnoff watching Black Panther because the movie was so gynocentric. I mean, everything in the movie was all about T'Challa, the women of Wakanda. And some people will sit there and say, oh, it's about the world of Wakanda. But no, if you have a movie called Black Panther, then Black Panther needs to be the center of that movie. When I did the book, The Temptation of John Haynes, it's John Haynes who is the center of the book. And as the center of the book, he is the main character, and we're supposed to see what he wants, and we're supposed to care about what he wants. Same thing with A Man Who Rules the World. And you have in the story, again, it's centered on John Haynes. He's supposed to be the main character, and we're supposed to see him taking the lead. We're not supposed to see supporting characters at the forefront when we need to see the main character and in front and center. So that was my issue with Black Panther, and that's why I believe it's important for Black creators to go out here and make characters like I did with John Haynes, because when it comes down to a character like John Haynes, I'm showing you that a Black man can, again, be that leader and have that leadership role that we don't get to see in mainstream media. So as of today, I'm still working on the new books for the John Haynes series. Right now, I have 2 that I'm working on right now. Dark Succubus is finished and edited, and all I'm waiting to do is see where Mike Williams' health is, because I want to hire him to design the cover for Dark Succubus the way he designed the cover for A Conversation with Death, because I want to keep the covers consistent. And Mike did such an amazing job that everybody wants to see him do another John Haynes cover. So I want to see where his health is, and if everything works out with Mike being okay and he's in good health, I will hire him to do Dark Succubus's cover. And Dark Succubus, it will be coming out this year if I can get Mike. If I can't and he's not available, then I will try to get the book out with another artist. But that's one of the things I want to do, is hire Mike to do the cover for John Haynes' Dark Succubus, just like he did for A Conversation with Death, because everybody loved this cover when I released it. And I want to hire Mike to do a refresh on The Temptation of John Haynes. Now, this cover was drawn by me, and I'm not the greatest artist of all. I originally had paid someone to do a cover. I paid a comic artist to do a cover, but it was so bad that I couldn't use it. And I wound up using this, and it wound up on a lousy book covers list, but that didn't stop the sales, because people read the story and they were so compelled by the story that they didn't care about the cover. But I want to put another professional artist cover on it, and I want to put Mike's art on the cover so that all the books are consistent. So that's a goal I have, and a goal I would love to see completed. So that's something I would love to do. But if he's not available, I will try to find another artist to design the cover for both Dark Succubus and The Temptation of John Haynes refresh. Hey, Chris. Chris Brown is the creator of Omega Black, great Black manga, and I believe you should check that manga out. It's just great manga, great story, and there's stuff in there from the Egyptian gods, there's stuff from Dragon Ball, stuff from Superman, and I can highly recommend it. But with the John Haynes, I'm looking to get the Dark Succubus out this year, and I'm getting closer to finishing the 3rd book in the John Haynes series, which is called The Man with Nothing to Lose. And that story, it comes out of the first chapter of The Man Who Rules the World. And if you rate The Man Who Rules the World and you know what happened in the first chapter, you're going to find out what the follow-up is in The Man Who Has Nothing to Lose. So that story is one that I'm getting near the climax on, and I'm hoping to have the first draft finished by the end of this month. And then maybe I can finally get to work on the fourth book, which is Taking Care of Business. And when it comes down to the John Haynes series, I have been, working feverishly on it because I know that there aren't that many positive stories that feature Black men, and there aren't that many positive images of Black men. So I really want to go out here and, get these books out as fast as I can. That was one of the reasons why I started featuring John Haynes in the ISIS series, because I didn't have Man Who Rules the World ready, but I wanted people to know that the character was still out and about in the universe. And as I did that, it was like one of the best things I ever did, because what I did was building up the character as Isis and Eastine talked about him. And as Isis and Eastine talked about him, that really built up in the ISIS series, that really built up momentum for Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. And as this book came out and Isis met John, that's what really started propelling the popularity of the ISIS series, because this was the book that, again, a lot of people would use as the gateway. This one and Bride of Dracula, these were the gateway books into the ISIS series, which was the second story arc, because it's that second story arc that people really, they have been buying a lot of. And that's where I believe that's because of the relationship between the characters and the John Haynes character, because once I introduced him, that's when people started really getting into the series. Before, they would read the books, they would read the stories, but when I introduced the John Haynes character, it was like putting a match on gasoline, and it just started heating up, because it's just like every story that John comes into, he just makes it better. It's like he just makes every story that much more compelling. And every time I put him in a story, he just takes off. And I find it to be very, very interesting that, every time I put this character in a story, he just takes off, and people, they want me to do more stories with the character. And that's what I'm trying to do right now, is trying to do more stories with the character. And I'm trying to get more stories with the character out. And that's what I'm working on right now, in addition to the ISIS graphic novel right now. Now, the ISIS graphic novel, I'm going to do a whole video on that tomorrow. I did a blog on it, but I want to do a whole video on it, talking about it. And I'm this close. I'm working more and more on the Indiegogo for that. But the John Haynes, what I want to do is I'm trying to get it out for 2019. I'm trying to get Dark Succubus up, and then I'll get into editing the next John Haynes book. With the John Haynes series stories, they're a lot like my ISIS series books and my Eastine series books, in that every book is an entry point, and the foundation for the entire SJS Direct universe is The Temptation of John Haynes. So this is a book that is essential reading for anyone who wants to read SJS Direct universe books. This one will lay the foundation for everything, and once you read this one, you will understand everything as related to the SJS Direct universe. I'm reading the chats now, and Hardcore H believes that the new Milestone is going to be gynocentric. Love Army, multicultural women. Oh, that sounds terrible. That doesn't sound like a Milestone book. I mean, I know that I've always advocated for Milestone to go out here and give us a book featuring a heroine, but this concept, it just doesn't work. I mean, I've advocated for years saying that Milestone should have had back in the 90s, I said we needed a book with a heroine, and this doesn't seem like a concept that I would want to read. It sounds like some SJW stuff. I have to wonder, what is Hudlin smoking something? Multicultural women who protect the world in secret? That doesn't sound like a Milestone hero. When I think of Milestone heroes, I think of Hardware, Icon, Static, Blood Syndicate, and there were so many heroines in Milestone they could have used. They could have done Flashback, they could have done Rocket, They could have done any of those characters, and they could have built a comic on that because their stories were that compelling. And Devon said he's coming up with a story for a black Union soldier who gets taken by aliens. And I don't really have any pointers for that. I can't really come up with that. So you have to do your own research. Benny's coming up with an idea talking about social justice warriors, but that would be a book. I don't think that book would sell too well because when it comes on the SJWs, they don't buy anything. Yeah, if he's friends with Kamala Harris, that's scary. I mean, Hardcore H is saying that that Reginald Hudlin is friends with Kamala Harris, and that's troubling for me because KKK Kamala Harris is not somebody who any black person should want to be friends with, especially when you look at KKK Kamala Harris's track record as related to black people, how she has persecuted and prosecuted black people and worked towards imprisoning black people. She's not someone who I would consider to be friends with. So I look at that and I look at him running Milestone and I'm like, Milestone is not in a good place. And that's one of the things that's really sad is we really need Dwayne McDuffie. I wish Dwayne McDuffie were still alive because he would come in there and check that because it was Dwayne McDuffie who was the one who gave us a lot of those positive images of black heroes in Milestone Comics. And we clearly see that it's off the rails. I mean, where's John Rossum? John Rossum was Dwayne McDuffie's best friend. And John Rossum he's a white guy, but he was his best friend. And he wanted to try to honor Dwayne McDuffie in the New 52 Static series, but he wound up getting derailed by Dan Didio. But John Rossum wouldn't allow that because he valued Dwayne McDuffie as a friend. He was almost like a brother to him. Both of them came up here in New York and they learned comics here in New York. So I look at that and it's like, you're going way off of what Dwayne McDuffie originally planned for Milestone. I mean, that whole concept, it just doesn't feel like a Milestone concept. And Dwayne would not want that out there like that. He would not want that at all. So that's something that it just makes me shake my head. Let's see. Bombor asked me, should Governor Northam step down? Yeah, he should step down, but I doubt he's going to do it. He believes that he can just he's going to try to run the clock out as long as he can. But what he's trying to do now is trying to say that his lieutenant governor, a black man, participated in sexual assault and use that as a deflection to keep us from seeing the blackface. Now, I did a video on this Governor Northam, but I couldn't put it on YouTube because if you make any criticism regarding a certain political party and the members of a certain political party, what will happen is they will try to shadow ban that video, or they will go out here and try to flag that video. So I couldn't put that video on YouTube. I had to put that on Black Junction. So obviously, Hardcore H, when it comes down to Milestone, they have not produced a single book. I mean, it's been, 3-4 years since Milestone announced that it was coming back, and we have not seen a single book, a single creative team, or a single project come to fruition. They announce a lot of stuff, but we don't see any books in the marketplace. I mean, I've been here since 2011 with the SJS Direct imprint, and ever since The Temptation of John Haynes, I mean, I have published numerous books. I've published over 60 books featuring multiple characters. And what's sad is, Milestone has this great catalog of characters, but they haven't been able to release a single book in years. I mean, this is like 2-3 years since Milestone said that they were going to come back, and we haven't seen a single book. And that's something that I find to be questionable. I mean, when I was doing SJS Direct, I laid the foundation for everything, in advance, and I had the books ready to go, and I can get those books out very quickly. But Milestone can't get these books out on time. Now, I'm sitting there and it's like, I mean, they just can't get the books out. And they should have got those books out years ago. I mean, we should have seen Milestone books in the marketplace, but they haven't. I mean, if I could get SJS Direct, regular books out, Milestone with millions of dollars should be able to get those books out with nothing, because I work on a shoestring budget. I mean, most of my books are done with next to no money, and I can get books out fast, but I'm trying to get them out even faster with less errors and less issues, but I can get them out. Then Milestone should be able to get them out, and that's what's really troubling about Milestone. It shows me that there is no real leadership at Milestone, and that there is no real direction at Milestone. And that's something that I started to see with the later books from Milestone, because the later books, I got a chance to read a lot of the books that I missed online after I left college, because I used to buy Milestones from a black vendor in Fordham Road when I was going to college in the Bronx. And I used to buy the Milestone books on the regular, and I missed a lot of the books from late 94 to 95. And I started to see a real decline in quality. And the worst I started to see was the Long Hot Summer. Now, Long Hot Summer reminded me a lot of the SJW books out there in Marvel Comics right now. I mean, the whole story was about this riot that happens and gentrification, and the whole story falls completely apart due to the shallow storytelling. And the ending, which is Wise Son gives a speech, and then you have all these heroes fighting all this stuff, and it all ends on a speech. And it's just one of the worst stories a Milestone ever produced. And as I was reading the comics from that era, it was really, I could see the sadness in the Milestone offices. They had literally given up. They had lost their fight. They had lost their passion. And I could see it in the pages of the later Milestone books that came up about 94, 95, 96. And it was something that was very disheartening to see, that they had just given up. I'm hoping that the energy at Milestone is a lot more positive, because when you're in the publishing business, it's a marathon, and they were more caught up in the popularity at the time in the 90s of the comic book craze, and they had lost their heart when they started to see their sales go down. But as a publisher who has been in those dark periods, I know that when your sales are going down, that's when you have to start to have a lot more passion. That's when you really have to, push and drive further. That's how you draw on, get better ideas for stories, and then you go out here and then you have to market and promote even harder, because that's what I did when I had took my parts of my toy collection to pay for the cover for Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and I saw the sales were down. I just had to dig down deeper and push harder. And because I persevered, I was able to push past that rough period and move forward. And that's something that I'm hoping that the people at Milestone have this time. They have that grit and determination to keep pushing, because in the publishing business, your books aren't going to start out, selling blockbuster numbers. And if they do, eventually things are going to start going down, and you have to be able to dig deep to bring them back up. And this is something a lot of people don't understand about the publishing business that I have learned over the last decade or so working on SJS Direct books, is that if I want to get sales, I have to go out and push for them. And that's what I've been doing over the last couple of years, going from Twitter and Facebook. One of my friends, Liz Isaacs, she referred me to those websites to promote, and then learning more and more as I went along. And then people ask me, start doing live streams, and I do them all because I love my customers, I respect my customers, and I want to build that relationship with those customers so I can go out here and get sales. And I'm going to leave a link to another one of the John Haynes books, A Conversation with Death, right now, so you can go pick that one up along with A Man Who Rules the World. When Mio asks me, how would DC fix Batman or Superman now that he's ruined? I don't believe Batman and Superman are ruined. I believe that what DC needs is a new editor in chief. And that's one of the things I talked about in my video where I proposed my offer to become the new editor in chief at DC Comics, because with DC Comics, what they need is a leader to set a direction for the brand. And it's that leader who will set a direction for the brand that will allow Batman and Superman to come back. Because when it comes down to the characters, the foundations for the characters are not the problem. And all it takes is one writer to write one really good story to get those characters to come back. I've seen this happen with many characters like the X-Men, where the book was in the garbage for years. I mean, X-Men was doing so badly with the 5 white bread X-Men that they didn't know what to do with it. And then you had Len Wein and Chris Claremont come in, and they brought the X-Men back. You had Iron Man, which was struggling for years, and then David Michelini came along with Bob Layton, and they brought that book back, and it became popular. And then you had Daredevil, who was for years struggling, and then Frank Miller came along and brought that book back. So if you have a good creator come in, that creator can rebuild that character and then redefine that character for a new generation. So that's something that can be fixed easily. So when I look at, Beta Male Batman by Tom King and Brian Michael Bendis' Beta Male Superman, that's something one good writer can come in and repair almost immediately. Because once you bring in a really solid writer who starts writing solid Batman and Superman stories, then people will start buying Batman and Superman books. Again, I'm going to try to put this conversation with Deathlink in first, and it doesn't seem like it wants to go through. Let's try another one. Keeps giving me error messages, but you can find the books on Amazon, and all the books are there. You can also find them on Smashwords and okay. Okay, one second. I'm listening to Chris. Chris is saying that Milestone's absence is one of the reasons why he created Omega Black, and he got tired of waiting for new stories. And you should never wait for somebody else's stuff. If you have great stories, go ahead and tell them, and go ahead and get them out to the marketplace. That's something I've learned over the last 10 years, is to not wait for any other publisher to give me their opinion of my work. And I learned to just go out and believe in myself, believe in my projects, and just go out and take it to the marketplace and let the customers decide whether they like it or not. I'll tell you from my own experience, Temptation of John Haynes got 500 rejections from publishers and literary agents, and many of those publishers and literary agents, they were extremely hostile to me regarding this story. They did not like the story. It wasn't a story they cared about, and it was a story that some people had issue with, just having to read a story where you're talking about a black man in a leadership position, a black man in a position of power. It was a story that I got hostile responses for, and you just have to go out and believe in yourself and put it out there. And once you believe in yourself and you show that you believe in what you're writing and you care about what you're writing, your book will find an audience. And Temptation of John Haynes, almost 10 years later, is still finding an audience. It's still building an audience. It still gets consistent sales. And the follow-up books like Man Who Rules the World and the ISIS books like Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, Bride of Dracula, Escape from Transylvania, Night of the Vampires, and the start of the John Haynes series, A Conversation with Death, they still continue to find an audience. So if you believe in your work, it's going to find readers, and those readers are going to go out here and they're going to build the word of mouth for those books. So so for Chris, I give you this advice: just go out here, take your books out there, and share them with the world. Because when you have a great book, that book is going to find your audience. That's what I was talking about in my video I made years ago, where I talked about don't wait for Marvel or DC to make your heroes. Go out and make your own, because that's what I did myself with John Haynes. That's what I did with ISIS. That's what I did with E-Steam. Was I said, you know what? I'm tired of waiting for these publishers to tell me that my work is good. I know my work is good. I believe in my work. And because I believe in my work, I'm going to take it to the marketplace. And readers go out here and they find the books, they enjoy the books, and they go out here and they buy the books on the regular. And what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to expand the audience for SJS Direct Books so that more people can find my work and more people can find out what's great about characters like John Haynes and what's great like characters like ISIS and E-Steam, and see how much fun the SJS Direct universe is overall. So with this SJS Direct universe, I want to show that it's possible to give readers a positive image of Black people and show you the diverse world of Black people, because when it comes down to Black characters, we don't really get to see all of Black culture, on display. Even in universes like Milestone, where we started to see some diversity, we really don't get to see the expanded picture of diversity that we see. Because oftentimes when it comes down to Black characters, usually what we get is usually what the diversity comics calls the Gordon Good brother, or we get, the street dude, but we don't really get to see that balanced picture of Black manhood, nor do we get to see that balanced picture of Black womanhood. That's something I try to present in my work on the regular, whether it be, ISIS series books, John Haynes series books, or E-Steam series books, is I try to give you that balanced picture of Black manhood or Black womanhood so that you can see how Black people are as human beings, and you don't get to see some sort of stereotype as related to Black men. Now, as it relates to the John Haynes character, that's one of the things that I was very passionate about, even when I was creating the character in 1990, because I was looking at the images of Black people back then, because in 1990 we had the NWA coming out, we had Ice Cube, and we had the thugs coming, thug culture starting to begin. And that was something that I was concerned with at 17 years old, because I saw the golden age of Bill Cosby coming along. I grew up with that at 11 years old. I saw Benson. I saw shows like Sunny Spoon and all those great movies from Spike Lee. And I wanted to continue with that positive energy, and I wanted to continue building on the legacies of men like Robert Townsend, Spike Lee, Bill Cosby, Bill Duke, and many others who came up during that golden age of Black cinema and Black media. And when I saw that thug culture starting to creep in, I wanted to continue going out here to continue promoting positive images of Black people. And that was the thing that inspired me to get back into writing in 1990. And it's one of the things that kept me pushing towards writing as I entered the 2000s and as I started the SJS Direct imprint in the 2010s. So that was one of the things that really drove me. Thank you, Bot Boy, for ordering 3 of my books. He said he was going to buy 3 of my books last week, and he did. And I saw it on the sales for Kindle, so I thank him for that support. And I appreciate all the support everyone gives me. So every time you guys go out here and buy a book, I thank you for that support. Every time you guys donate to the Super Chat, I thank you for that support. Every time you donate to the Patreon or PayPal, I appreciate that support. And I take all of that money again and I use it towards going out here to either pay artists like Mike Williams or Bill Walko to design covers for SJS Direct books, or I use it towards paying for things like the internet for my home, because as part of the Sean James Initiative with Obsidian Radio, that was one of the goals, and we met all of the goals for that Sean James Initiative just a couple of months ago. And I'm hoping that everyone helps me meet the goal for getting the ISIS graphic novel funded, because that is the next step for the SJS Direct imprint. I want to go from just not publishing books to going into comics. And I would like to publish the first SJS Direct comic, which is going to be an adaptation of the upcoming ISIS series story, All That Glitters. So that's going to be one of the big projects for this year. And that Indiegogo is going to be launched on March 5th, which is the week that Marvel Studios' Captain Marvel comes out. So that's one of the things that I'm planning. And if we can get that Indiegogo funded, what I'm going to plan to do next is an adaptation of John Haynes' A Conversation with Death. So this would be the next book to be turned into a graphic novel or a comic. And that would be the next project I would want to work on after I got ISIS All That Glitters funded, because I wanted to continue doing more comics, because everything that I'm doing, it came out of my love for comic books. And originally, ISIS, John Haynes, and Easting, they were originally meant to be comic book characters. So that was something that would be a lot of fun to see the characters go into the medium I originally planned them to be in. And it would be fun, I would believe, to do more books as comics. One of the again, A Conversation with Death would be the next one I would want to do an Indiegogo for. And the next ISIS graphic novel I would love to do is a Bride of Dracula adaptation. And I would love to do that one as an Indiegogo if we can get the All That Glitters funded. So those are projects I would love to do in the future. And those are projects I would love to share with readers in the future as comics. And that's something that is like down the road, but most people have been asking me to do more John Haynes stories. So I want to do more John Haynes stories. And again, I have 2 more ready to go. One is in the draft stage. The other one is finished. And again, I'm just waiting for the cover. And that's where we're at that right now. But when it comes down to John Haynes, he's one of the most popular characters in the SJS Direct universe. I'm surprised at how popular he was in the SJS Direct universe, because for the longest time, Easting was the most popular character in the SJS Direct universe. But the minute I put John Haynes in books, he just started to take off and he started to get a following. And people tell me that he reminds them a lot of DC's Constantine. And that has me thinking about something I did a couple of years ago, because I applied for the DC Writers Workshop a couple of years ago, and I didn't get picked for the DC Writers Workshop, but I wonder if I did, and I had submitted John Haynes' A Conversation with Death as a comic, I wonder, would this have been a bestseller? I wonder, because it sells very well for me, but I wonder if I did A Conversation with Death as a comic at DC or at their Vertigo imprint, would it have sold well? Because it sells well for me in the SJS Direct imprint, but I have to wonder, would it sell well as a DC comic? Would it have become a huge hit? And I sometimes wonder that about many of the books that do well in the SJS Direct imprint. If I did them as comics and they were sold in comic shops, would they sell well? And I have to, that's one of those questions I would love to see answered. Devon, that is a Punisher in the background, and this is a Walgreens Punisher. It was a birthday gift from a family member. And this is a Walgreens Punisher. It's part of my Marvel Legends collection, which are primarily gifts from family members. And they give me those gifts because I'm just a hard man to shop for clothes, because I'm between sizes and stuff doesn't really fit me that well. So usually they just buy me, figures, and those figures have been a part of my collection for over a decade. And usually that's what I used to sell to pay for the cover for Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. And I also used parts of that collection to go out here and pay for the other covers when I would get a donation that would cover part of it, and then I would go out to eBay to pay for the rest of it. So when people would give me donations, like they gave me for Samurai Goddess, they gave me the donation for that book. I think it's in front of me. Yeah, they gave me a sister gave me a donation to pay for this cover. And what I did was I started selling more parts of my collection to finish paying for the cover, because that's how I do things. I believe that if God gives you a blessing to go out here, and you are supposed to put something with it, because I believe that faith without works is dead. So you got to put some work in along with the faith whenever God goes out here and blesses you. So that's something I personally believe, and that's something I apply whenever I'm out here and I'm working and I'm trying to get a book out. I always, again, take whatever people give me, and then I take a little bit of my own and put it with it. So that's something I do all the time. And when it comes down to this, I've been doing this for, I've been running SJS Direct for over a decade. And the cornerstone of the SJS Direct is the John Haynes character. And he is the flagship of the SJS Direct imprint. He's the flagship character. A lot of people would think Isis and Easting are the flagship character. No, but John Haynes is the flagship character of the SJS Direct imprint. And he's a character I based on myself, but what I learned over the years is not to make the character a Mary Sue or a Gary Stu. And what makes the character popular with readers is that he goes through hardships, he goes through adversity, he fails, he falls, and he grows. And that's because I learned from an early age that, people don't want characters that are just there and have no challenges, no obstacles, and no conflicts, because that makes for a very weak story. So I always put my characters through hardships and adversity, and I put them through the toughest hardships and adversity. I mean, with John Haynes books, the stakes are extremely high. I mean, with Man Who Rules the World, we had literally the world in crisis, and it was up to John Haynes to, bring these men and gods together to overcome that threat of God Cassius. And he faces high stakes with characters like Dracula. And I always put him up against these big heavyweight villains. And that's what makes writing John Haynes stories a major challenge, is that it's how am I going to find a way for this character who has no real powers or abilities to overcome, whatever challenges that I put the character in. Because I always set the stakes to be very high for the John Haynes stories. And I mean, they are extremely high. I mean, with Dark Succubus, it's like a life and death situation where it's like if he's in this dream and he doesn't get out of the dream, he may die. So I always make it where the stakes are high so that readers can get into the story and see, the struggles that this character faces in this battle against Lucifer and the forces of Lucifer's legion. And it's those forces that he faces that, I made that to be like the everyday battles everyday Christians fight. And I wanted to make it like a story where you can see how this struggle of good and evil go by, and how a Christian has to deal with these struggles every day. Because when it comes down to a follower of Christ and a follower of God, this is the battle that we fight every day. But a lot of times, a lot of people don't know about that battle and that struggle. But I wanted to, you know, put it in a fantasy context so you can see how that struggle goes on almost every day and what goes on every day as related to it. And that was one of the core parts of the temptation of John Haynes, because again, it's a two-way street as I saw it. And on that two-way street, yes, the devil is trying to destroy righteous people, but God has his people there to be an example to sinners like the Eastern characters so that they can see the way that they're supposed to go. So that's a core part of the John Haynes story, and the John Haynes' story model is seeing him as this example and of a follower of God and the power that they have, and seeing him overcome the greatest of enemies with next to nothing, and him being able to use his resourcefulness to overcome those great challenges. So that's another part of John Haynes' stories that makes them very compelling and fun to read. Like Bride of Dracula, seeing him with no powers overcoming a goddess who was like Isis, who was under the thrall of Dracula. And people love that story because the hero has to overcome, the double threat of this supernatural menace and the goddess under the control of the supernatural menace. And in Escape from Transylvania, he has to escape all these vampires who are trying to hunt him. I took ideas from there to write those stories from Hammer horror films, and I took them from the movie Escape from New York, and I also, from Escape from Transylvania, took ideas from Dracula's Daughter to do that one, along with Hotel Transylvania, because the character of Dracula's Daughter, I took some elements from Mavis, from Hotel Transylvania, and I took different elements and ideas from those stories to do this John Haynes character and further progress his development. And again, I did that because I wanted to give people that positive image of Black manhood and Black masculinity. And I wanted to show that you could do a Black male character in a fantasy story, and he could be a strong lead character, and he could be a character that could show that example of manhood to everyone. And it's been a very popular book, so far, the John Haynes character and the John Haynes series. And I'm hoping that readers, come out here to pick up more of the books, and I'm hoping I can get more of the books out soon. So I'm going to talk to more people in the chat. And so if you have any questions, you can ask me any questions right now. I'm going to try to be on until about 1 o'clock. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Okay. So if you have a question, you can ask me a question. And I'm going to be doing some other stuff that's related to SJS Direct, in addition to the right now I'm getting ready to launch some other books in addition to the Isis All That Glitters and Eastern Goddess of. So I'm getting ready. I want to do Dark Succubus. That's the book I want to get out this year. That's the John Haynes book that's going to come out this year. And I'm trying to get, again, I'm running out of things to say. I don't know about Blade and Deadpool, Devon. I'm still trying. That's a tough match. But I'm going to try again to try to post this link to Man Who Rules the World. I don't know. YouTube system doesn't seem like it wants to cooperate. I'm going to try to post a link to that one again. And it just doesn't seem like it wants to post. I don't know what's going on here. Emil says that Blade could win. Yeah, he could win, but I don't know. But with Deadpool's healing, it could be a tough match. So it could be a tough match because when you have Blade, yeah, he's got great weapons and he's a vampire, but I don't know. But then again, Blade could wind up biting Deadpool and wind up getting those powers. I don't know. It's a tough match. Oh yeah, John Haynes was also part of SJS Direct's Fantasy Flashback Fall, and to show how popular the character was, to my surprise, because in Fantasy Flashback Fall I did two books. Gotta get this one out of the box. He was a part of Fantasy Flashback Fall, and he was featured in Easting the Sands of Time, and this was a story that featured a younger John Haynes who was transplanted to ancient Egypt, where he met the younger Egyptian Easting. And in this story, we see the Easting and John Haynes relationship as they were teenagers. And this book was extremely popular. It was the best-selling book out of Fantasy Flashback Fall. And it was a story that featured John Haynes, and people loved this story. And it got 2 5-star reviews so far on Amazon. And it's a book that, to my surprise, did even better than I expected. Now, I based this one and got inspired by Disney princess movies, and I wanted to make Easting a Disney princess-like character, because when it came down to Black Disney princesses, like the one in Princess and the Frog, we weren't getting a positive image of Black women in that story. So in this story, I wanted to show you a Black princess from ancient Egypt, and I also wanted to show you a Black woman who was a heroine, who was strong and positive, and I wanted to show a Black man and a Black woman together. So this was a cover that it meant a lot to me to get this book out, and I love Bill's work on here because this one looks just like an animation cell straight out of a movie. And this is one that that a lot of people, they just enjoyed reading, and they enjoyed sharing it with people. Chris asked me, what do I think of the new Ironheart comics? Well, I've read them and they weren't that great. I mean, the character has evolved a little under E-viewing, but it's just the foundations of the character that have structural problems, and it's those structural problems that keep us from really connecting with the characters. Like what they're trying to do now is try to retcon the character into somebody relatable, and it's not really working because the character, as I see it, is way too damaged at this point. And the character just isn't at a point where people are going to want to read the character. And that's something a creator has to think about, because when you create a character, they only get one chance to make a first impression. And if you make a poor first impression on the readers in your first 1 or 2 issues, what happens is the readers don't connect with the characters, and they don't connect with the story. I'm happy to hear, Naya713, that you're really enjoying Temptation of John Haynes. Everybody who usually reads it, they tell me the same thing, that it's that they enjoy the story and that it's very compelling. But I wanted the story to be one that would really get readers into it, and I wanted to make it a solid foundation for everyone, so that when they start reading other books, they see where everything goes. I had one reader who told me from Temptation of John Haynes, he saw where everything was in the SJS Direct universe, and he saw where all the foundations for everything was. They're making I heard about the Men in Black with that Tessa Thompson, that one, and Chris Hemsworth. That's not even worth the time to even watch or even spend the money on. So that's one I would just, pass on altogether. That's just more identity politics, more social justice, more farcical things that no one wants to be a part of. So when I look at Men in Black it's just like Ghostbusters 2016, just more identity politics and more forced diversity. I'd rather just have Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones and leave that franchise alone, leave it to where it was before. Yeah, I did 2 videos today as well. I did 2 videos. One was about Christophe St. John and the Man Crisis, and the other one was about Liam Neeson. Those 2 are also up on the channel, so if you want to see those, you can see those on the channel. And looks like the one with Liam Neeson is doing a lot better than the Christophe St. John one. The Christophe St. John one I did because the man Christophe St. John was what I consider a man in crisis. Christophe St. John struggled with a lot of issues as related to his racial identity, because a lot of people think Christophe St. John was a black man, but Christophe St. John was biracial, and he was dealing with issues as related to his mother rejecting him, and it's those issues that led to your Christophe St. John struggling over his life, and his son wound up killing himself as a result of those issues, because he, as a biracial as well, was struggling with those issues. And that was a video that I wanted to make, because a lot of people don't see how a lot of men are struggling out here, and a lot of men are suffering out here, and how these men in crisis, how they suffer in silence. And sometimes, even if they get help, sometimes it's a little too late. Now, Christophe St. John he was trying to get help later on, but he needed help earlier in his teens and his 20s to understand that, God loved him, and that he needed God's love if he wanted to go on with his life. And that was something he needed to deal with, because, again, when it comes down to a lot of mixed race, biracial people, they struggle with that because one parent rejects them, and then they want acceptance from that parent, and they want acceptance from that part of the community that they come from. And that's where the tragic mulatto paradigm or stereotype comes in. And sadly, when it came down to Christophe St. John, he followed down the road of the tragic mulatto. And he did that because he didn't know that there was another road he could follow, sort of like what I was writing about in the novel Spellbound, where the Matilda Crowley character believed that she had to go down that dark road and of the tragic mulatto until she found the darker shade of black, which was in the goth subculture. So there is another road that people can go on, but they just have to find it. And that's something that a lot of black people never really find, because they get caught up in these stereotypes and trying to fit into the black box that makes them acceptable to white people. Devon asks if social justice warriors are pretentious, and yes, they are pretentious. A lot of them are full of themselves. A lot of them believe that they are better than everybody else. And Ricky asked me, have I thought about writing a book on how to write female characters in fiction? I've thought about it, but I'd rather just do videos talking about it, because usually I don't know if that book would sell, but when I do the videos, people wind up learning a lot more, and people wind up learning from what I'm talking about, because with a book, what I would have to do is really break that stuff down, and I don't know if people would get it, but when I do the videos, people kind of understand it a lot better. Because when I write about heroines, when I make videos about heroines, and I talk about, the female story model being different than the male, and I talk about things as related to women being emotional, a lot of my readers and some of the people who watch my live streams and my videos, they pick up on it, and they pick up on it a lot faster. So to my surprise, I've learned that people who are writers, they watch my videos and they learn from that video more than they would from a book. Now, certain topics I would do books on, like when I was doing the Man Crisis, I did the Man Crisis because I didn't want to just keep making videos about mass shooters. I wanted to go in depth and give you an understanding of why these men are participating in these behaviors. So I would go out here and I did the entire book so that people could get a really in-depth understanding. But as for writing women, I do this as I would rather do it as a video, because a lot of, for my surprise, a lot of aspiring comic writers watch my videos, a lot of manga writers watch my videos, and a lot of comic book creators watch my videos. And they learn from that video about learning how to write heroines, and they learn how to write female characters. I haven't really thought about doing a character with a disability, Rapper 1000. I mean, because in order for me to write that, I'd really have to live that and understand that, and I don't want to wind up offending someone by writing a disability the wrong way. So I would rather not write a character and then write a character badly. So as it relates to characters with disabilities, what I would have to know what that disability is. I'd have to do research on it, and that would help. That would be a way for me to, that would be the only way I would be able to write it, because I'd have to know something about it in order to write it. But I do write about different types of, things, like the John Haynes character. He's an introvert, and I write about the Matilda Crowley character. She's an introvert, and I write about those type of things because I have experienced those things and I understand them. So that's the type of thing I would write on the regular, because for me, I don't like to write things that I don't know, because I don't want readers coming in here telling me that things are wrong and things aren't working. And that's something that a writer doesn't want, because that means you're not going to be able to sell any books if you have books that are written that don't match what's going on in the real world. Reading through the chats again, and yeah. But when it comes down, but usually I know how to write women very well, because I have a lot of female family members and I have seen them interact. I've interacted with a lot of women. So that's one of the things that makes it like a strength for me for writing female heroines and writing them in fantasy scenarios, is that I have a lot of family members, and I've watched a lot of movies with my favorite actresses in them. So I try to capture voices of actresses in the narratives, and I try to tell a really balanced story so that you can see a balanced picture of both men and women. Got about 15 minutes more. I'm going to try to answer some more questions. So if you have another question, just let me know, and I'll try to answer it in this live stream where I'm talking about John Haynes, and I'm talking about the John Haynes series and a lot of the things that inspired me to create the character and create his story, and the things that led to me, working on this character and where he is so far. Now with this John Haynes character, I'm hoping to take the character to another level this year. I mean, the sales numbers for A Conversation with Death are strong, and I want to keep that momentum going. And I'm seeing that the model that I had, which was from the old comic book model, actually works with paperbacks and ebooks, and that when people buy one book in featuring John Haynes, they go back and buy other ones, or they're anticipating buying the next one, which is Dark Succubus, which I'm hoping to get out this year. Bombour, I have not seen Aquaman yet. I would love to go see Aquaman, but I guess I'm going to have to catch it on Warner Brothers service. I would consider a crossover with Black Sands, but the whole thing is that my approach to gods and mythology is a little different than theirs. But I would consider a crossover with them. I really love Black Sands. The story was great. And it's a story that I really enjoyed. And I was one of those books that when I was at that book festival, that was one of the books I was going to spend money on when I first saw it on the table. So I would love to work with those producers on a project. And if they would reach out to me, I would be glad to reach out to them. Okay. Ricky asked me if I have a book on how to write comics. No, I learned everything on my own. So I learned reading Wizard World. I had like when I was moving from here from my old neighborhood apartment to Parkchester here, I found an entire 22 pages I printed when I was working at AmeriCorps from Wizard World on learning how to write comics. And the way I learned how to write comics was from that Wizard World article on writing comics, which was a long time ago. And then I learned from reading scripts. The way you learn how to write comics is you have to learn how to read scripts because it's a lot like screenwriting, but it's very condensed, it's very concentrated. And you have to learn how to write action in panels. I'm going to go more in depth with it probably in another video or probably another series of blogs. But when it comes down to writing, it's a completely different approach to writing than novels and screenplays. And you have to be able to condense the action from one picture in a single image and then have that image move from panel to panel. And it's like writing a novel, but distilled. So it's like super concentrated storytelling. And it's something that you have to learn hands-on. And that's one of the big problems with the comic book industry these days is that no one is teaching these crafts. Nobody's teaching these trades. And that's why the comics these days are so bad, is because no one is teaching the craft. And a lot of the veterans who used to teach the craft, a lot of them have passed away. Guys like Len Wein and Norm Brayfogle and many others, they have passed away. And there's nobody there to really teach things. And a lot of the editors themselves, I talked about this in one of last week's live streams, is that a lot of times these people have no experience and no understanding of things. And they think writing comics is easy, but writing comics is just as challenging as writing a novel or writing a screenplay. And you have to know how the medium works in order to tell a story in it. I had to learn the hard way from on my own. That's how I learned novels, and that's how I learned screenplays. Was I taught myself, and as I taught myself, I started to learn the nuances out of it. Now, when I first started working with comic artists, I made a huge mistake because I did the cover for Temptation of John Haynes, and I thought the artist would just take my image and just draw it in his style. But my mistake was not giving him enough instructions of what I wanted. Now, when I started working with Bill Walko on covers for books like like Isis, All That Glitters, and Isis Samurai Goddess, and other Isis series books, I began understanding that I needed to tell him exactly what I wanted on the cover. And in some cases, I would just draw out what I wanted on the cover in some very horrifically bad drawings. But from what I drew and what I wrote, he understood the story I wanted to tell, because I would also give him a storyboard for the story. And that would tell you what was supposed to happen. And from there, he understood what I wanted done, and then he would just go even beyond what I would imagine. Because when I look at a cover for Bride of Dracula, I mean, the idea I had for this cover, it was like crazy. The art that I did for the concept was absolutely terrible, but Bill went out here and he just made a masterpiece of a cover with Bride of Dracula. I mean, the action on this cover literally looks like it came right out of my imagination. It looks like an animation cell from an ISIS cartoon. And that was all because I started learning how to write in the comic book style. And as I wrote the concepts for covers like these and, covers like Easting the Sands of Time, as I started learning how to write these covers, I started to learn how comic panels work. So when I learned how a comic panel worked, then I knew how to tell a story in the comic book style. And that's when I started working on the script for the ISIS All That Glitters graphic novel. And that's when I started laying out the script and laying out the story for it, because I finally learned how to make those panels move and learned how to make those panels, go from panel to panel in taking the words and making them into pictures, because that's the challenge of comic book writing, is you're learning how to make those panels take those words and turn them into panels and make those panels move from panel to panel. So that's the challenge of it all. Rapper 1000 says some of these comic pros don't even like comics or respect the material. And that's true. Some of the newer guys, they don't like comics or the material, and they're in comics because they can't get a job anyplace else. It's like teaching back in the 1970s and the 1980s. A lot of people wound up getting degrees in liberal arts and things like gender studies and women's studies. So they couldn't get a job anyplace else. So they decided to become teachers. And now that teaching has raised its bar and you need a master's degree to become a certified teacher in places like New York City, what's happening is that most of those people who couldn't do anything, now they're coming into the comic book industry because they can't go anyplace else. So they come to comics because they can't do anything else. And what that does is it keeps very passionate people out of comic books, and it keeps very passionate people from getting in the door at comic book companies. Now, people like myself who are passionate about comics and passionate about telling stories in the comic medium, what they do is they wind up going someplace else, like Joss Whedon did many years ago, or like myself, what they do is they go into a different type of writing, which is what I did with publishing and trade publishing, or a lot of them just go out here and they make their own comics and they just walk away from the trade business and they start doing things independently. And that's one of the reasons why I want to go out here and do the ISIS graphic novel based on All That Glitters this March. Is I want to do this to show how a story that I write can be translated into a comic and show how that comic can be accessible to new readers and how the story model I created could be accessible to new readers and new audiences. Because when it comes down to any SJS Direct book, usually I try to keep the content PG-13 and make it family-centered. And that's what I try to do with the John Haynes books, is I try to make the character, accessible and relatable to readers of all ages, because I believe, again, readers of all ages need to see a positive image of a Black man. They need to see a positive image of a Black man as a leader. And they need to see a healthy relationship between a Black man and a Black woman, which is what you see between the John Haynes character and the Eastine character. You see both of them having this healthy relationship as they take on Lucifer and the demons in Lucifer's Legion. And they take on those supernatural threats in the stories of John Haynes, like The Temptation of John Haynes, Man Who Rules the World, and, Conversation with Death. We see this character, we see him taking on these supernatural threats, which is my commentary on the everyday struggles that Christians go through, because Christians, we go through these struggles every day. We take on these everyday struggles from the enemy and his legion of demons. And I wanted to make the demons human so that you could see that your demon isn't just a monster with reptile eyes and horns. It's a human-faced monster, and that human-faced monster is one we run into every day. So the Lucifer I put in the story, he was inspired by actor Keith David, and whenever I write Lucifer, his voice is Keith David, so that in the narratives, whenever I'm writing him, I'm always thinking of Keith David and the way he would talk, because he has this baritone voice that's extremely distinct. And that was what I was thinking when I wrote the character. And he's running the world. He thinks he's running the world, and he doesn't and he thinks he's going to run everything through this corporate system and these politics and things like that. And he wants to destroy this John Haynes because he just doesn't like him and he doesn't like what he stands for. And I'm going to go in depth on that in the John Haynes series of both of the reasons why Lucifer doesn't like John Haynes, why he can't stand him. And I'm going to go in some future stories. I'm going to talk about that because I feel that's a core element that needs to be discussed with that character. And that's something I plan on exploring later on. The Eastine character, again, she was inspired by actress Sally Richardson Whitfield, and I saw her. I heard her voice in Gargoyles, and that's where I got the idea for the Eastine character because it was just on her voice, and I liked the way she spoke. And then after I saw how attractive she was, that's where I got the idea for the Eastine character. Now, when it came down to the whole John Haynes concept, again, I didn't really do much with the character until 2005 or so, and that's when I came up with Temptation of John Haynes, because I wanted to make a commentary on how the road between heaven and hell are a two-way street, and just as the devil again is trying to destroy people, God is using those people to be an example of Christ so that they can see him in them, and that will lead to them wanting to change. So it's a two-way street, and it's an ongoing struggle, and that's what I wanted to show with the John Haynes character. And that's one of the things I want to show in the John Haynes series, is that the struggle is going on between, the God's forces and the devil's forces, and how that struggle goes on almost every day, and how those who believe in God, like a John Haynes, they can do great things, and those great things that they do is through the faith that they have in God. That's the thing that I wanted to show in the series on the regular, because you see that in Man Who Rules the World. You will see that when he takes on God Cassius. You could see it in Bride of Dracula when he literally beats up Dracula. And that's some of the things that I put in the story, is that you see this character, and he does these amazing things that even surpass some of the god-like characters like Isis and Eastine. And he does that because he's a servant of God and he's an agent of God, and he wants to show that power of the living God. Now, yes, I'm not disheartened by not being hired by Marvel and DC. I'd rather just go out here and do my work and build my own audience and build my own platform, because at this point right now, I'm just resigned to the point where I'm saying that, I'd rather just do my own stories and my own characters, because I believe I could tell a better story with my own characters and my own stories than I would with their characters. Now, when it came down to Isis, those were all stories I had proposed for a Wonder Woman run. And with John Haynes, it was one of those things that just evolved organically over time. And with Mike Williams, encouraging me to go out here and do the John Haynes series, the character has started to build some momentum. It started to build an audience, and it started to build a following. So I'm still out here trying to get my own characters out here. And that's what I encourage guys like Chris to do, is go out here, bring your characters to the marketplace like I did with John Haynes, because you never know if they can go out here and find an audience. And I get inspired by many of the indie creators out here. They go out here and put their work in the marketplace, and that inspires me to go out here and put mine out here. Ricky asked me how long does it average to do a graphic novel? That depends, because right now I think it would take anywhere from about 6 to 9 months, because you have to have the script written first, and then you have to talk to the artist about his schedule, because I talked to Bill about his schedule, and he says he's available for the project, but I want to make sure I get the funding first before Bill starts doing any work. And from there, I've heard that Bill works very quickly, and he has worked very quickly, because I asked him to do an ISIS cover for this book, All That Glitters, and Eastine, Goddess Of. I asked him to do both of these covers, and he was able to get them done in a month. So he was able to get 2 covers from me. I asked him in September, and he had them ready by November, at the end of November. So it depends on the artist and how fast they can work, and it depends on if you can get the other members of the team, together. Because what I'm going to do is what I need to do right now. I've got Bill. He's going to be the penciler and the inker for the project. But after that, I need to get a colorist in, and I have a guy who I talked to about letters, and he's going to do the lettering. But right now, what I need to do is just try to find a colorist. But I'd say anywhere from 6 to 9 months, depending on the talent you need to put together. Now, if I was my own artist, it would take a lot less time. But because I'm a writer, it's going to take a little bit more time. So that's one of the things with the Indiegogo. It's going to take a little bit more time, but I'm hoping to get all the books out, because once we get the production stuff finished, then all it means is we're going to take the PDF and then take it to the printer. And then from there, everybody would get their books on an Indiegogo. So it doesn't take that long. It just depends on who's doing the work. I mean, for a project this like I'm doing, it would take a little bit more time because I'm just a writer and I'm an editor and stuff like that. But if you're an artist, like a guy like a Josh Howard, who's drawing his own book, T-Bird and Throttle, I recommend you go get that one. It would take him a little bit less time because he's already written the script and then he's just doing the drawings, and he's just trying to raise funds to pay for the printing and pay for his bills. It would take him a little bit less time. Same thing with Dan Mendoza. It wouldn't take him as long, but I'm just getting started, so it'd take a little bit longer for me. Oh, Rapper 1000 is telling me about another creator who did his own books, and yeah, you could do that. He did that with bright blue colors. If you have a good colorist, they can put any sort of colors on it. I saw a colorist that does a lot of great work on Bill's commissions on some sample work that he did. I would love to hire that colorist. I need to talk to him about that colorist to see if they're available. And again, that's the other challenge, is finding out who is available to do the work and before you do a project, because you might contact someone who might not be available, and that can really affect your timeline. So everything has with these type of projects, it can run into delays if a guy is having issues with his computer or he has too many projects. But it just depends on if that person is available and if they can, dedicate their time to doing their work on your project. So, graphic novels, the schedule can vary from, book to book and project to project. But I'm hoping to get the ISIS graphic novel out sooner rather than later. And again, the launch date for that is going to be March 5th. So mark your calendars. That's when I'm going to do the ISIS graphic novel Indiegogo. And when it comes down to John Haynes and the John Haynes series, you can pick up The Temptation of John Haynes on Amazon.com, along with the sequel to The Temptation of John Haynes, The Man Who Rules the World. And you can pick up John Haynes's appearances in ISIS series books, like ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, ISIS Night of the Vampires, ISIS Bride of Dracula, and Escape from Transylvania. And you can pick up the first book in the John Haynes series, John Haynes, A Conversation with Death. I'm going to end the stream, and I'm hoping that you come back for next week's stream. And you can pick up all of those books that I mentioned on Amazon.com. I thank you for spending time with me on the stream, and I hope you pick up all the books that I talk about related to John Haynes and the John Haynes series.